Welcome back to Fantasy Intervention. This is the Fantasy Six Pack. We do this every week, and we bring you 3 beers that are going up and 3 beers that are going down. I'm with Corey Spala, and my man across the table right here is the chef, FF Chef, and I'm Juan Carlos Pena, and we're going to get right to it. I'm going to start with my beer that I like this week and going forward, actually, and it's Tyler Lockett. All right, so this is a well-known brew. Hasn't hit its stale point. He's still only 28 years old, and he is signed through the 2021 season. So Tyler Lockett is a player you definitely want to hold on to and try to acquire. So he still has 4.4 speed, and he's having a stellar season. He's in the top 12 in snap shares, slot snaps, routes, targets, target shares, as well as yards, completed air yards, touchdowns, and he's sitting at number 2 on the year in fantasy points per game. So what we've seen is Lockett's biggest games this year have come up against teams that have attempted to put a shutdown corner on DK Metcalf. So Lockett has taken opponents to task in these games. He had 19.7 points against the New England Patriots and Stephon Gilmore, 37 against the Dallas Cowboys with Trayvon Diggs covering Metcalf, and an eye-popping 53 fantasy points when Patrick Peterson was covering DK Metcalf, and he ended up with Dre Kirkpatrick. He only went off for 15, 203 touchdowns in that game. So coming forward, if you look at the rest of the schedule for the rest of the season, he's going to keep on benefiting from the emergence of DK Metcalf and opponents trying to shadow cover him. He's going to face the likes of Tre'Davious White, Patrick Peterson, Darius Slay, James Bradbury, and Jalen Ramsey twice. While other owners might try to offer you Lockett as a sell high option, it still might be a good value. And for you to grab him at whatever it is they offer, if someone offers you Tyler Lockett, grab it, take it back, and enjoy. Pop, lock in. Pop, drop, and lock it, right?
Yeah, pop, drop, and lock it. I love it. And I'm going to continue this run, Juan, and I'm going to go with second-year guy, receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles in Mr. Travis Fulgham. Fulgham, a 2019 sixth-round draft pick from Old Dominion, is making the Lions and Packers seriously regret not holding on to this hidden gem. Only managing 3 targets for 0 receptions in 2019 with Detroit, you can understand why they dropped him to waivers. He was waived by both teams this past August, only to be waived again by the Eagles in September. Thankfully for the Eagles, they re-signed Fulgham to their practice squad. 3 days later, although Fulgham didn't see the field until week 4, with only a 61% snap share, he was able to secure 2 receptions on 3 targets for 57 yards and a touchdown against the notoriously strong 49ers defense. Since then, he's leading the team in receiving yards, receiving touchdowns, and yards per game with 435 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 87 yards per game. Clearly, Wentz's number 1 target. From weeks 4 through 8, he leads all wide receivers in PPR scoring with 96.5 fantasy points. Season long, he's 3rd in air yards per game with 109.6, 6th overall in receiving yards per game with 87, and 6th overall in fantasy points per game with 19.3 PPR fantasy points per game. This may be your last chance to acquire Fulgham before your league's trade deadline. In Dynasty, his value will only continue to climb as he faces teams like the Seattle Seahawks, Cleveland Browns, Saints, Cowboys, and my team, the G-Men, all teams in the bottom 10 of the league for most fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. So crack open this fresh new receiver and enjoy him for years to come.
All right, with that, I might as well keep going with the wide receiver here. The brew that I'm going to crack open is Tyler Boyd. I mean, what more does this man have to do to get some respect? His current ADP of 59.25 and wide receiver 28.4, courtesy of DLF. Yeah, Boyd is currently wide receiver 8 in PPR leagues. He is 10th in yards, 8th in targets, and 5th in receptions amongst wide receivers. Boyd is tied to Joe Burrow through 2023. That is 3 more seasons. He's looking to put up his 3rd consecutive season over 1,000 yards, and he's currently looking to build on his previous 90 reception season in 2019 to be his first 100-yard reception season in 2020. This pass-heavy offense has Boyd thriving. He's seen a minimum target of 5, and he is averaging 8.5 targets through these 8 games. Look to see continued success in the passing game with Joe Burrow and Tyler Boyd moving forward.
So we went up. Now let's go down. What are you pouring out, Chef, this week, or keeping on hold, or what are you doing with this beer?
Um. Okay, so normally we pour beers down the drain when they're skunked, but I'm not doing that necessarily with this player. But I'm definitely not cheersing him up for our friends here. My stock down player this week is Marquise Hollywood Brown. Now, we were all hoping for Hollywood Brown to take the next step with former MVP quarterback Lamar Jackson this year. Unfortunately, he has not warranted any more value in production. In 2019, he finished as wide receiver 44 with 142.9 fantasy points. That's 11 fantasy points per game. In 14 games played, not bad for a rookie, but through 7 games played this year, he ranks wide receiver 42 with 77 fantasy points. Now, if you're doing the math, that's the same 11 fantasy points per game. So he has definitely established a floor, and he is truly a low floor boom or bust candidate that frankly will give you more of a headache trying to trust him week to week than taking the easier route and just trading him to a league mate. I'm not saying he's a bad wide receiver by any means that you have to get rid of, but the production scares me. He has only 2 touchdowns this season and has hit double-digit fantasy points only 3 times in 7 games. 2 of those games were against the Browns and the Steelers, who are ranked in the bottom half in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. In his last 2 games, he finished as wide receiver 42 and wide receiver 53, scoring 9.7 and 7.3 fantasy points. True wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 production. Up next, he faces the Colts and the Patriots, both teams in the top 15 of fewest points fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. With the Ravens using a run-first game script of 54.2% run versus 45.8% pass, it's clear that Browns' production will continue to be questionable on a week-to-week basis going forward for the foreseeable future, making him the more everyday kind of domestic beer compared to the more high-profile craft beer you look forward to drinking on game day with your friends. So swap him out if you can before that trade deadline passes, and cheers.
Cheers. And it's funny, Chef. Last week I did a big name like that, Ezekiel Elliott, and that was my stock down player, and this was your stock down beer. These are popular names, and it's something that you shouldn't normally do. And for my stock down beer, I'm kind of going to do the same thing. And it's not often that someone tells you to pour out a contender for beer of the year. Like, this rookie legitimately has that chance. So especially when that beer is a rookie running back that has been averaging 100 yards from scrimmage and has provided double digits fantasy points in every single game. And I'm talking about James Robinson.
What?
Yeah. So when the beer is at its highest value and it's hit its peak, I feel like it's time to sell, especially considering the price that you paid. This is a little-known barley wine that was a waiver wire pickup but has yielded great results. He has risen to the top of the fantasy leaderboards and is currently at number 5 on the year in total points and 6th in points per game. So you're thinking, like, why would you trade him with all that praise that you're heaping on this player? But his value is unlikely to get any higher. In the next 2 weeks, he's going to face the 29th and 32nd ranked defenses in the Houston Texans and the Green Bay Packers, respectively. Now, his value is at a peak right now, and it may go up just a bit higher in the next week, right before that trade deadline. But with an unknown quarterback in Jake Luton taking over for Gardner Minshew, teams are going to be able to stack the box and focus their efforts on stopping James Robinson to make the offense come to a pause. He still has matchups against the Steelers and the Ravens looming. So trading Robinson at the trade deadline for one of the other rookies from his class with higher pedigree, or for future draft picks if you're in a rebuild, could be the type of bold move that keeps you ahead in Dynasty for years to come.
All right, Chef. I guess me and you were on the same page here. You took the wide receiver for the Ravens. I'm going to take the tight end for the Ravens. Mark Andrews, the tight end 3 in Dynasty leagues. Yes, I'm pouring him out. So what I mean is I'm trying to sell him at his high value right now. I do not see him going any higher. I actually see him falling a little bit in tight end rankings. Lamar Jackson is currently 27th in passing attempts at 190. Nick Foles, who has started 2 less games, is at 233. That's 43 more passing attempts. Andrews has 3 out of 7 games over 10 points scored in 2020. And all 3 of those games, he has a touchdown. With 2 of those games, he had 2 touchdowns The other 4 games, he has posted an average of 2.25 receptions and 26 yards. In 2019, he had 9 games over 10 points, and 8 of those he scored a touchdown. So this begs the question, is Mark Andrews touchdown dependent? I am selling right now while I can. So if you do not have a reliable backup tight end, maybe look to try to trade for Dallas Goedert or Jonnu Smith, and maybe get a 2021 second-round pick back as well. If you do have a capable 2020 backup, maybe try and swing Irv Smith and a 2021 first from a frustrated Irv owner. Sell on his high value right now and get a little bit more back and reap the rewards of an up-and-coming tight end in Goddard, Jonnu Smith, Irv Smith.
I'll drink to that, man. I'm an Andrews owner in a couple, man, and I think I'm going to hit the trade market tonight off of that take.
He just gave you an idea, Chef.
Yes, he did. My brain was going. The light came on. Thank you, Corey. Appreciate that, man.
I love it. So this has been the Fantasy Six Pack with Fantasy Intervention. I'm Juan Carlos Pena. You can find me at FF One of a Kind, and I am with.
I'm James Kriess. You can find me at FF_Chef.
And of course,
Shit.
Yeah. Yeah. Whoa.
Like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.